You're watching the ZNS Network, the People's Station.
Duties and heavy responsibilities of sovereignty, which have now passed to me. In taking up these responsibilities, I shall strive to follow the inspiring example I have been set in upholding constitutional government and in carrying out the heavy task that has been laid upon me, and to which I now dedicate what remains to me of my life.
With one voice and consent of tongue and heart, publish and proclaim that the Prince Charles Philip Arthur George is now, by the death of our late sovereign of happy memory, become our only lawful and rightful liege lord. Bless his majesty with long and happy years to reign over us. God save the king. God save the king.
And with that, the Bahamas has a new head of state. Good afternoon, I'm Julian Reed, and we are bringing you live coverage of the Proclamation ceremony for His Majesty King Charles III as sovereign of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas and his other realms and territories, King and head of the Commonwealth. Well, King Charles succeeds his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, as the new head of state of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. After 70 years on the throne, Queen Elizabeth died at Balmoral on Thursday at the age of 96. Immediately upon her death, Charles, the former Prince of Wales, became King Charles III. Yesterday in London, Charles acceded to the throne. The ceremony held by the Accession Council, which included several Privy Councillors. The proclamation was read by the clerk of the Privy Council. King Charles was not present for the reading of the proclamation, but later emerged and gave an emotional tribute to the Queen and pledged to follow his mother's example as monarch. Today in London, King Charles, who serves as head of state in 14 countries, including the Bahamas, met with the high commissioners of those countries. Now, those countries are Australia, Belize, Canada, Grenada, Jamaica, New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the Solomon Islands, and Tuvalu. Indeed, Bahamas High Commissioner to the United Kingdom, Alison Greenslade, participated in this event. Now, of course, this is the first time most of us have seen a change in the monarchy. When the Queen acceded to the throne, it was not televised at all. So this is quite an historic moment. Now, today, the ceremony for the reading of the King's Proclamation in the Bahamas should last about a half an hour or so. There will be gun salutes, and the reading itself all will take place outside of the Senate in Parliament Square, where Darrell Miller is standing by. And let's go to Parliament Square and Darrell Miller now.
It's a beautiful afternoon here in downtown Nassau, the capital of the Bahamas, as we prepare for the proclamation ceremony for His Majesty King Charles III. Her Majesty has passed, and now the King will be proclaimed in the Bahamas as our head of state. In a few minutes, the ceremony will begin. We have two prime ministers, formerly of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, who will read the proclamation. Those two former prime ministers being the Right Honorable Hubert Ingraham and the Right Honorable Perry Christie. They are Privy Councillors, And so they will read the proclamation. What is interesting is that there are several countries, including the Bahamas, that recognizes or has as its head of state, in this instance, His Majesty King Charles. And so in addition to the United Kingdom being England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, in addition to those countries, there are 14 other countries that recognize or have as their head of state His Majesty. The Bahamas, of course, is one of those. We'll tell you more a little later. As for how the ceremony will proceed this afternoon, it will be very, very brief, and we will have, standing to the far left of the Queen Victoria's statue, the wife of the Prime Minister, the Honorable Philip Brave Davis, and then the Prime Minister himself, and then will be Mr. Hubert Ingram, and then Mr. Perry Christie. The chair is reserved for the Governor General, His Excellency the Honorable C.A. Smith, and next to him will be the Chief Justice of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And so in a few minutes, this ceremony will begin. It will encompass both Parliament Square as well as Rawson Square. And so while the proclamation will be read from Parliament Square, those attendees and other dignitaries may be over on Rawson Square. And then in the old parking lot of the Cabinet Building,
well, we're having a little bit of transmission difficulties coming from the Parliament Square there, but we will go back to Darrell Miller in a bit once we get that sorted out. But as far as what is expected to happen today, I will give you an outline. At 3:15, well, of course, we're past 3:15 right now, but at the special invited guests expected to have arrived, and I think you saw some of them on your screen. Senior government officials attending the ceremony should be in place by now. At 3:45, the Deputy Prime Minister, members of the Cabinet, and leader of Her Majesty's loyal opposition should be in place. At 3:50 p.m., the Prime Minister and Mrs. Davis should be in place. At 3:55, His Excellency the Governor-General will arrive at the Senate. And at 4 p.m., the ceremony will begin. Now, a small contingent of both the Royal Bahamas Police Force and Defense Force bands will be in the square in front of the Senate building. The national flag and the flags of the Senate and the House of Assembly will be flown. The Royal Bahamas Defense Force will assemble a firing squad. There will be a 21-gun salute at the end of the program before we hear the British national anthem, God Save the King, and that will be followed by the Bahamian national anthem, March on Bahama Land. Trumpeters will be here as well, and those trumpeters will begin to sound the fanfare at 4 o'clock. At the end of the words, God Save the King, the band will play that, and of course, it'll be followed by the national anthem of the Bahamas, as I said. Now, you heard that the proclamation will be read by 2 privy councillors who actually happen to be 2 former prime ministers, the Right Honourable Hubert Ingram and also the Right Honourable Perry Christie. Now, prior to the accession of King Charles to the throne, they were referred to as Queen's Counsel. That no longer applies. They are now King's Councils. So you have the Right Honourable Hubert Ingram, KC, and the Right Honourable Perry Christie, KC. As he said, the actual ceremony should be quite short, about 15 to 20 minutes, and we will continue to bring it all to you. We also have some other clips. Now, those of you who might remember at the time of independence, when then Prince Charles, the Prince of Wales, position that his son William now holds, and his wife, they are the Prince and Princess of Wales. But in 1973, Prince Charles represented his mother, the monarch, here in the Bahamas, and that was, if you can remember, quite a fantastic time, a fascinating time that we all enjoyed thoroughly. Who knows, we might have King Charles next year. It's not confirmed at all, but when we celebrate 50 years, that would be a wonderful occasion, as he remains King of the Bahamas and head of state. Now, you can see right there on your screen a young Prince Charles who has been preparing for this role of king for most of his life. His mother, at 25, took the monarchy, and he's been waiting for it for years, and now at 73, upon her death, he actually has acceded to the throne. Now, of course, he has not been crowned king yet. A coronation ceremony may not happen right away. In the case of the Queen, it was 14 months before she actually was crowned. We're now going to take you back downtown to Darrell Miller.
Welcome back to our continuing coverage of the proclamation being read here in Parliament Square in connection with the ascension to the throne of King Charles III. And guests and dignitaries are beginning to arrive here. We have seen the President of the Court of Appeal, Sir Michael Barnett. We are also seeing members of both the House of Assembly and the Senate. We note the leader of the opposition, the official opposition, the Honorable Michael Pintard, and others. As we were beginning to say earlier, there is no need for members of Parliament to take another oath on Wednesday when the Assembly meets, because the oath that they took was to Her Majesty and her successors. And so in this instance, the successor is ascended to the throne, His Majesty King Charles. In a moment then, this ceremony will begin. It's not many people to be seated. This is a brief ceremony. It will be standing. I believe one or two chairs are designated, A for Dame Marguerite Pinling, one for the Governor General, and one or two other chairs. This is indeed a very historic moment in our life as a country. This has not occurred for the last 70 years, Her Majesty having reigned for that length of time. In fact, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II was the longest reigning sovereign of the monarchy. What would happen now is that His Majesty, as we wish him long life, he is ascending to the throne as the oldest sovereign. So at 73, he is ascending to the throne. Okay. Julian?
You, Darrell. Of course, Prince Charles, if you know anything about him, his focus in the past has been on things like architecture, the environment. He's been a staunch advocate for the environment way before anyone actually, before it became popular, really. Of course, he will have to give up, to some extent, the level of activism that he has actually had in those areas. As monarch, he will not be able to do that. But we suspect that his son, William, the now Prince of Wales, and the Princess of Wales, his wife, will continue those efforts in a very strong way. Now, we talk about Lady Pindling and Dame Marguerite Pindling, of course, who is a former Governor General, and who, of course, has been in the company of Her Majesty fairly frequently. She, of course, was, like the current Governor General, a direct representative to the monarch. So that's the representative of the monarch here in the Bahamas. And we should have about 10 minutes or so before the ceremony gets underway. And as I said, you can expect quite a bit of pomp and pageantry, along with 21-gun salute. Of course, this is a very interesting period, because as we acknowledge the accession to the throne of the king, we're also mourning the death of his mother, the Queen. And we'll hear more about that as we move on. Now, you have here on your photo a picture of, a video actually, of the king and his consort, his queen consort, Camilla. Now, just to make things clear, there's only one monarch, and that is King Charles III. Camilla has been given that title. It was something that Queen Elizabeth II wanted her to have. And what it really means is that she is there to give support to the monarch. Now, the queen consort has no sovereign powers whatsoever, but she, of course, being married to the king, will act as a major source of support and inspiration to him, helping him to get his work done as head of the Commonwealth, king of the territories and realms throughout the world. Now, we have some video that we'd like for you to see, some historical stuff. The first address of King Charles that he made after acceding to the throne yesterday.
For the last 70 years, we have seen our society become one of many cultures and many faiths. The institutions of the state have changed in turn. But through all changes and challenges, our nation and the wider family of realms, of whose talents, traditions, and achievements I am so inexpressibly proud, have prospered and flourished.
Now, you hear the king there talking about strengthening of institutions. Of course, he is referring to the wider Commonwealth as well, the 54, 56 countries that form the actual Commonwealth. Only 14 of them now still have the king as head of state, and that, of course, includes the Bahamas. But, of course, many other countries have indicated a move towards becoming a republic and leaving the king as head of state. Now, of course, the Bahamas has not made such a decision or move as yet, but who knows what will happen in the future. But the Commonwealth, the Queen actually requested heads of government at the last Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, which I believe was in Rwanda, to endorse her son when he succeeds her to be head of the Commonwealth, and that was approved. And now, a year later, Her Majesty has gone, and His Majesty is on the throne, and he remains head of the Commonwealth as well. We're going to go back to Rawson Square, to Parliament Square, so you can see some of the images there, and Darrell Miller as well, who will keep us informed as to what's happening. If you take a look now, you will see the Royal Bahamas Defense and Police Force bands. This is a sort of smaller amount of the smaller composition, I should say, of the military bands there. And this is all in an effort to highlight the proclamation reading that you will hear in just a few minutes. At 4 o'clock it will begin. And as we said, the proclamation will be read by 2 people. Now we take you back to Darrell Miller at Parliament Square.
And now, as we continue to provide coverage from Parliament and Rawson Squares of this occasion of the proclamation for the accession of King Charles III, there is now a joint police and defense force band going on to the northern side of Bay Street in front of the bust of Sir Milo Butler, Sir Milo being the first Governor General in an independent Bahamas. And it is shortly after this joint parade that we expect the arrival of His Excellency, the Governor General, followed by the arrival of, I believe, the Prime Minister, and then the reading of the proclamation by 2 former Prime Ministers, the Right Honorable Hubert Ingram and the Right Honorable Perry Gladstone Christie. Indeed, a very special occasion in downtown Nassau, the capital of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, on this Sunday, the 11th of September, 2022. Again, this ceremony will be relatively brief. And the proclamation of Accession will be read by 2 former Prime Ministers. I think the Prime Minister, Philip Grave Davis, wanted both former Prime Ministers, both PCs, to participate in the reading of the proclamation. Ambassadors, members of Parliament, former members of Parliament, other dignitaries, leaders or heads in the judiciary are here for this occasion. At the end of this ceremony, there will be I think it's a 21-gun salute. It was originally scheduled for Charlotte, but will now be fired from East Street North and Bay Street, the old parking lot of the Cabinet Building. Onlookers are here as well. And again, the book of condolences will continue to be open for persons to sign all of this week. British High Commissioner, Mr. Tom Hartley, and his family here for this occasion. We also see Dame Margaret Kinley, other members of Parliament, Keith Bell, Wayne Monroe, and others. This is an occasion when members of Parliament and senators are in a particular dress. This is called dark lounge suits. The President of the Senate will appear shortly, and the Speaker of the House of Assembly will appear shortly. We'll see the Deputy Prime Minister, the Honorable Chester Cooper, accompanied by his wife. The Prime Minister, the Honorable Philip Brave Davis, will be accompanied by his wife. We were saying earlier that there are, outside of the United Kingdom, 14 countries that have as their head of state the sovereign of the monarchy. And so in the United Kingdom, that would be England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. In this part of the world, there are several countries, including still a territory, the Turks and Caicos Islands, that have as their head of state, in this case, His Majesty, King Charles. Then allegiance, or the oaths, are taken. In many instances, it is taken to whoever sits on the throne, the sovereign, and their successors. So it will not be necessary then, when the House of Assembly convenes, it will not be necessary for members of Parliament to swear or take a new oath, because it would have been to Her Majesty, now deceased, and to her successors. But there will be cases where new verbiage would be necessary now that the king sits on the throne. Bahamians far and wide await for the king to visit the Bahamas. In some cases, the verbiage would change. So the oath of allegiance for the Senate, for example, would say, I do swear that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II, her heirs and successors, according to law. So help me God. And the oath of allegiance for members of the House of Assembly is similar. I, Keith Bell, do swear that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II, her heirs and successors, according to law. Now, on the steps of the Senate will be His Excellency, the Governor General, along with the President of the Senate, Michelle Adderley. And there is the Honorable C.A. Smith, and then the two former prime ministers and the current prime minister, the
Yes, we are having some transmission difficulties from downtown, but you can see there now the police commissioner passing in front of the two privy councillors who will be reading the proclamation. And of course, those privy councillors are former prime ministers of the Commonwealth of Bahamas, the Right Honourable Hubert Ingram, KC, and the Right Honourable Perry Christie, KC. They are now starting to read the proclamation. In the UK, the Accession Council. We're going directly now to Rawson Square.
About the Bahamas. Proclamation. Whereas our late sovereign, Queen Elizabeth II, died on the 8th day of September 2022, and by whose death the crown of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas now solely and rightfully comes to Prince Charles, Philip, Arthur, George. Now, therefore, I, the Most Honourable Sir Cornelius Smith, Governor General of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, along with the President and members of the Senate, the Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, and the members of the late Majesty's Privy Council in the realm of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, with one voice and consent, publish and proclaim that King Charles III, by the death of our sovereign, Queen Elizabeth II, is now formally proclaimed sovereign of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Given under my hand and the public seal of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas at Government House in the city of Nassau, this 11th day of September 2022, and the first year of His Majesty's reign. Signed, Governor General. God save the King.
God save the King! Shoulder up! General salute! Present up!
cheers for His Majesty the King. Hip, hip, hip. Hooray! Hip, hip, hip. Hooray! Hip, hip, hip. Hooray! The King.
On! Yeah! Go! Yes! Retrieve! Up!
You are witnessing a 21-gun salute right now to mark the occasion of the proclamation of the new King of the Bahamas, King Charles III. Of course, this proclamation ceremony for His Majesty the King, as sovereign of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas and of his other realms and territories, King and head of the Commonwealth. Now, just before that, we heard the police commissioner in his capacity as provost marshal actually leading off 3 cheers for the king, hip hip hooray 3 times, and prior to that, God Save the King, followed by March on Bahama Land. Now, this ceremony is a very short one today, and following this 21-gun salute, the ceremony should wrap up. Now, of course, to make clear, King Charles has not been crowned yet. The coronation ceremony will follow at some point. It will definitely follow the state funeral for his mother, the Queen, Elizabeth II. Speaking of Queen Elizabeth, the Queen's funeral cortege is now at Edinburgh and is at Holyrood House. It will stay there until tomorrow, when it will be transported to St. Giles Cathedral for a special service, which should last about an hour. The Queen's coffin will eventually reach London. Our state funeral at Westminster Abbey is scheduled for Monday, September 19th at 11 a.m. UK time. But in the meantime, of course, our son, King Charles III, begins his reign as king at age 73. His heir, his son, William, now the Prince of Wales. The king, of course, with his wife, Queen Consort, Camilla, who is Queen Consort and not Queen Regnant. So she actually has no sovereign powers at all. And if you continue to look on your screen, you will see the defense and police officers have now dispersed. And at the top, you see a picture of the hearse carrying the coffin of Queen Elizabeth II. They now retreat to the Senate as this ceremony to mark the proclamation for His Majesty King Charles III as sovereign of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas and his other realms and territories, King, head of the Commonwealth, comes to an end. Now, you should know that in the countries where Charles is head of state, similar ceremonies are going on around the world. We've named the 14 countries that still have him as head of state, and I will rename them for you. In addition to the Bahamas, there is Australia, Belize, Canada, Grenada, Jamaica, New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Solomon Islands, and Tuvalu. And now we see them marching off. They're the members of the Royal Bahamas Police and Defense Force bands. So it will be interesting to see how King Charles carries out his reign. He has declared that his mother's is unmatched, and many believe that. But he has been given a very warm welcome from people in the UK and it seems around the world. At the same time, people around the world are mourning the death of his mother, who worked right up to the time. 2 days before her death, she was actually having audiences with outgoing Prime Minister for the UK, Boris Johnson, and incoming Prime Minister, Liz Truss.
Right! By the center! Good! Good!
And here you see the march past by the members of the police force band and also the Defense Force band. Now, before we close, we hope to go back to Parliament Square to hear from Darrell Miller, but that will be in just a few minutes from now. But as we said, a very relatively short ceremony today to mark the King's proclamation. Charles, after 70 years of reign from his mother, is now the new king of the Bahamas, which I know may sound very strange to some Bahamians, but that is what it is. He is the king of the Bahamas until the Bahamas decides to make a move in a different direction. And of course, that will require a referendum more than likely. But other countries are looking at it, and maybe it's something that we need to discuss more openly. But King Charles III, His Majesty King Charles III. Let's go back to Rawson Square now, if Darrell Miller is standing by for us. Apparently, Darrell is not quite ready yet. You saw the two prime ministers, former prime ministers. It was read by just one, the Right Honorable Hubert Ingram, KC, but he was accompanied and supported by the Right Honorable Perry Christie, KC. The 21-gun salute came from downtown as well, which was a bit of a novelty. We expected it would have come from Port Charlotte, but they made a decision to bring that downtown. For whichever tourists are in town, I'm sure that's a very exciting thing to witness, to see a country that has the King of England as its head of state. Now we're ready to go back to Darrell Miller. Darrell?
What were they using? They were big guns.
Yeah, I'm not. This brings to an end the ceremony where we have had the proclamation read, that proclamation saying that the King Charles is now on the throne. We are joined by the British High Commissioner to the Bahamas, Mr. Tom Hartley. It's good to see you again.
Thank you very much. Good to see you too.
Have you ever witnessed anything like that?
No, I haven't, and I don't think any of us will or have done. It's been incredible, but I've been following the reports from the 14 realms across the world today, and how they've all done it quite differently. But I thought the proclamation today was quite spectacular.
When you say realms, you mean those countries or grouping of countries that have as their head of state His Majesty King Charles.
Absolutely. So the first proclamation was read in London yesterday, and Australia, Canada, Antigua, and others, all the way to to the Bahamas now have all read the same proclamation and declared King Charles as their king. As the King of the Bahamas and the King of the UK and the King of Canada and the King of Australia and on.
And the head of the Commonwealth as well.
Indeed. So he is also, the Commonwealth is separate to the realms. The Commonwealth is a group of equal nations, including India and many other places in the world, Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya. And he is also now the head of the Commonwealth.
I like this, which is a combination of the United Kingdom and the Bahamas.
Absolutely. It's a friendship pin to signal us as equal brothers, equal nations under a shared king.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much. It's been my pleasure to be here today. I thought in the season of mourning, I thought all credit to the Governor General and to the Defence Force and others who have all done themselves proud by announcing the King today. And here, a gift for you, a friendship pin for us both.
Oh, thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are going to be joined now by Mr. Keith Bell. Briefly, sir, your impressions of this ceremony.
You know, all we could say is God is good. God save the King.
Yes.
And
yes.
It was a pleasure of being here to witness it. I think that we had a good support turnout from all of my cabinet colleagues and certainly the Honourable Prime Minister, the parliamentary caucus and everyone. And I think that it is important for us to recognize in our country that even though we have lost the head of state, we have gained one. And so we have political stability, economic prosperity and social cohesion, and that's what makes us Bahamian and keeps our country going. Amen.
That's a great combination. Thank you.
Thank you too.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Thank you.
We bring to a conclusion now the coverage of the proclamation being read in Parliament Square, recognizing our new head of state, King Charles.
Of course, inadvertently, we left out one of the 14 countries that remains or that retains King Charles as head of state, and that is Antigua and Barbuda. However, that country's Prime Minister, Gaston Brown, has indicated that Antigua and Barbuda is looking at moving away from the king as head of state in the next 3 years. So the good thing about all of this is that no matter whether the king is head of state or not, the Commonwealth is a very strong entity which all can benefit from. Well, we thank you so much for joining us here on this broadcast today for the proclamation ceremony of King Charles III. On behalf of all of our team here at the ZNS Corporation, I'm Julian Reed. Have a good evening.
You're watching the ZNS Network, the People's Station.